Welcome back to the Adonai gameplay animation workshop. Today we're going to be looking at nested widgets. This is something that we were supposed to look at in the last class. What a nested widget is the fact that you can apply multiple widgets inside a bigger one. So for instance, we have two widgets currently made. The first one being HUD underscore widget, which is our main widget blueprint, and then a health widget. The health widget only has just a progress bar inside it. So if I go ahead and change the fill percentage on it, that way we can see how it updates. The way it's working is that this is a blueprint within a blueprint. So you can simply just drag and drop a different widget inside another widget. What this helps us achieve is the fact that you can store multiple widgets without them affecting each other. So you can isolate your issues and helps with the optimization. And anything that you can access here. So for instance, if you go ahead and create a variable, such as this is a test variable that is created inside the health widget, you can also access that inside the event graph on this side. All you gotta do is make sure you have the health widget, this one, set as a variable. As long as it is set as a variable, you can drag it here, get that health, and out of this you can figure out and get, this is a test widget. This is the same variable that is available on this particular blueprint, and work your way according to it. This also means that you can access it through your playable character as long as you have a HUD widget reference. So for instance, we have our HUD widget reference right here. This is going to be stored in this variable known as the HUD reference. So if I do get HUD reference, I can search for get health. This is the reference to this particular widget, and then I can also find out this is a test variable. So we are able to access our final variable, which is inside a widget, which is inside a different widget, using just a side chain of references. Which this means is you can also have a different widget inside this particular widget, and then that chain can continue on infinitely. Another thing that we talked about is layers. So layers in Unreal work similar to that of Photoshop. And the way you work that up is with Z order. So Z order is something that is available for every single piece inside the canvas panel. The canvas panel is basically what dictates how big or small your work area is going to be. And when you're dragging it, Unreal has a nice setup where it will show you how big or small you want something to be. So let me go ahead and undo that real quick. Okay. And Z order refers to how tall or how short you want something to be. Okay. So let's go ahead and just leave this at 1080, 1920 by 1080. In terms of the order, this order is shared between other widgets. So if you have a widget that is set at 10 on the order on this widget and 5 on this one, then the one that's on 10 is going to display over the other one, even if you have a higher Z order for it. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. But that's about it for widgets. Let's go ahead and look at what we did in terms of jumping. So in terms of jumping, instead of using the input action key, so input jump, this input action event, this was the one that Unreal had it set as default. This comes from the project settings. And under project settings, under input, under action mapping, so this event jump is going to have all these things that can trigger that value. So anytime the spacebar button is pressed or the gamepad face button bottom, this basically means the bottom button on the 4 buttons on a gamepad. So Xbox controller, PS4 controller, Nintendo Switch, etc. That is going to be used for jump. So anytime one of those buttons is pressed, this event is going to run. For the purpose of our tutorial, we're only using spacebar because we are sticking to a keyboard. The way we are using jump as a function is by calling the jump function that is innate to player characters within Unreal itself, because it is inherited by the character movement, right? So if you click character movement, this is the character itself, that's the character movement. You can see there is character jumping / falling. So here you can change how much control you have over the character. The higher this control is, the more you can walk around while you're jumping. Jump velocity dictates how far up you will go and how far up you can go. Okay, so the way we have this set up is that when you press spacebar, it will jump, and as soon as you release it, it will stop jumping. We also have a variable set, a Boolean variable, which is dictating is jumping, and it toggles between the two. We are using this variable to be referenced on the animation blueprint. So let's go ahead and check the animation blueprint for what we did. So in order for us to have a jump cycle, what we needed was to find a way for this variable, which is telling us if the character is jumping or not, to be referenced on the animation blueprint. So soon after all the things that we set up, similar to crouching, prone, aiming, we're doing the same thing for jumping, right? So we found the character blueprint reference. This was set up with the get actor of class. That's the character reference. And then we're finding the is jumping variable, which is this variable. And then we're passing it into a brand new variable that we created, which is called APP is jumping. So whenever this variable is true, that means the character is trying to jump. Whenever this variable is false, that means the character is not trying to jump. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at our anim graph. So this entire area is designated for jump. As you can see, the default movement is what has our idle animations along with everything else. And the way he's going to jump is, instead of the jump being just a single animation, it's split into parts. This is so that the character can start a jump, end a jump, and the jump apex can stay on as long as the character is in air. So we start that by adding all the animations in. So we have the third person jump start, we have the third person jump loop, and finally we have the third person jump end. Another key thing to notice is that the loop part of the jump start and jump end are turned off, while the loop animation for the jump apex is turned on. This is because you only want the animation for the jump start to be played once, because your character doesn't constantly want to keep jumping. He'll only do that once. Okay, we will only do that once per jump. Then we're gonna set up the transition rules between them. So the first is ABP is jumping. This is self-explanatory, as in if that player character is controlled by a player and that is the player presses spacebar, it's gonna do the jump. This is the physics part of it, and this is the animation part. So this is going into the variable is jumping. This variable is getting set over here. As soon as that is true, this will go from this default movement to the jump start. Then the next part is we're doing the time remaining ratio. So basically we're making sure that this animation gets completely sorted out before moving on to the next one. Then it's the jump apex. Then we have ABP's falling, which is going not. So as long as it's not, as long as the character is not falling, only then can this state go forward. So we haven't set up ABP's falling just yet. what that means. We'll get to it in just a second. But in the meantime, jump end is also the same as the jump start, where the time remaining ratio defines when the transition state is going to go from off to on. All right, so the major problem with us not being able to use this ABP's jumping is the fact that we have set this up where it's going to stop the jumping process as soon as we let go of the spacebar button. So as soon as we let go of the spacebar button, the is jumping is going to turn off. So basically it's going to do a very short loop. So even though our character is going to be in air, so let me just showcase that real quick. So if we do ABP is jumping, so as long as he's not jumping, let's see. Okay. So if I press jump right now, you can see he just goes into the idle as soon as the spacebar button is gonna go. We can continue pressing the spacebar and then it would work fine, but as soon as I let it go, that's when it will stop. So I'm still pressing the spacebar and our character still seems to be falling because the is jumping is still turned on, and as soon as I let it go, then it will stop. Okay. So instead of us relying on the player to stop jumping and start jumping on time, what we did is use Unreal's physics engine to find out when our character is falling and when he's not. So what we did is we got the character reference and then we got something known as the movement component. This is the same movement component, which the character movement component, which defines if our character is walking, falling, swimming, flying, etc., which has also the jump slash falling components. And both of these work. This is a direct reference, whereas this is a functional reference. So this can change to be at any pawn, whereas this is only a specific character reference to this particular character blueprint reference. You can just go ahead and search for character movement. So you can either do get character movement or you can find get pawn owner character movement, or that's not it. And yeah, that one. Anyway, and out of that, we are searching for is falling. There's also a D is different one. Is moving on ground, is flying, is crouching, is swimming, is falling. So these are the different state that dictates where this general setting of the character movement is going to take place. So if is walking is true, then the is moving on ground part going to be true. If we set this as is flying, then is flying is going to return a true value. Because at the end of the day, you see this is a Boolean, right? Okay. So we set it up with is falling to make sure we can see our character is either in the air or is not. And then we created a brand new variable called ABP is falling to see if our character is falling or not. Once we have that set up, this has nothing to do with this at all. It's just checking the character and its movement, similar to what we did for the velocity. You see, we're just using get velocity as a function, right? This is a physics function inside Unreal, and then that's finding a vector length, and that's giving us the ABP speed. So instead of us trying to dictate how fast it's going by manually hard coding in the numbers, we're just letting Unreal find the velocity between 2 points when the character is walking and set that as our speed, which is what we use for our blend space. Okay. So once we have this set up, we're gonna go back into our jump cycle, and we're just gonna use ABP is not falling. So once you have ABP is not falling, it's gonna automatically jump on the proper time, fall until he can, and then stop as soon as his feet touch the ground. So that animation starts playing as soon as a part of the character touches the ground, and it almost is as if, sure, the character is on the ground, but he plays the animation after it, but Unreal blends it seamlessly, so it feels like the animation is playing before the jump actually ends. Okay, and now the final thing is this transition state. So this is a extra transition state that is just nice to have in your games. This is from default movement directly to the jump apex, and that is when the ABP falling is true. So this is when the character did not jump, but he did start falling. So whether it is because he fell off a ledge or whether it's because he jumped off a plane, etc. So this is the transition state it would use. If you wanted to use an animation with it, you could also just add a tiny state here and then continue along with it. So, if you want to have like a little dive animation before your jump apex plays, something like that. So you can totally do that too. But yeah, ABP is falling. And then let's go ahead and see what that does. So our character is up here. And right now, if I jump and I fall, he does the falling animation. So if I walk off the ledge, even though I didn't jump, he did do the falling animation. Okay, so that covers our jump loop cycle and how we set it up using the event graph and how it is interacting with our actual player graph.